They told me I wasn't welcome in my own home. My son looked at me coldly and said, "If you don't have a salary, you don't belong here." His words pierced deeper than any winter chill cutting through my thin coat on the streets of Chicago. Today, I'm going to tell you something I never thought I would share. And if for even a second this feels familiar, I only ask that you like this video and subscribe. It will help me keep opening my heart. Every morning I wake up in this cramped studio apartment on the south side, the hum of L trains rattling my windows like a persistent reminder of life moving on without me. My fingers, once nimble with the scent of lavender soap from years of dishwashing for my family, now tremble as they wrap around a chipped coffee cup from the dollar store. The city sounds blend together outside my thin walls, vendors shouting in Spanish and English, sirens wailing down State Street, children laughing from a playground I can hear but can't see from my fourth-floor window. I'm Eleanor Margaret Walsh. I'm 73 years old, and I used to believe that being a mother meant everything. I raised 3 children in a beautiful brownstone in Lincoln Park. I cooked every meal, ironed every shirt, packed every lunch. I thought that love was measured in sacrifices. I thought that family was forever. I was wrong about so many things. The apartment where I live now smells like the neighbor's cigarettes and yesterday's coffee. My furniture consists of a worn recliner that came from Goodwill, a small table that wobbles when I write, and a bed that squeaks every time I turn over. The walls are thin enough that I can hear the couple next door arguing about money, their baby crying at 3 in the morning, the old man across the hall watching his television too loud because he's too proud to admit he needs hearing aids. But on that cold afternoon 3 months ago, sitting alone as I always am now, my phone buzzed with a text message. It was from my son Michael. My heart actually jumped, the way it does when you haven't heard from someone you love in weeks. I thought maybe, finally, he was calling to check on me. Maybe he wanted to invite me for dinner. Maybe he missed me the way I missed him every single day. The message was about his wedding. The big wedding I'd been helping plan for 18 months. The wedding I'd contributed $7,000 toward because his fiancée wanted real orchids instead of silk ones. The wedding where I was supposed to wear the navy dress I'd been saving for, the one that still had tags on it hanging in my closet. Change of plans, the message read. You're not supposed to come. Ashley's family needs the space. That's it. That's all I got. No explanation. No apology. No acknowledgement that I was his mother. That I had carried him for 9 months, stayed up with him through fevers, taught him to ride a bike, paid for his college textbooks when his father said we couldn't afford them. I stared at that message for 20 minutes, reading it over and over, hoping the words would rearrange themselves into something that made sense. Something that didn't feel like a knife twisting in my chest. The photos on my small dresser seemed to mock me then. There were pictures of all of us from better times, Michael in his Little League uniform, me cheering from the bleachers at Wrigley Field. My daughter Sarah blowing out candles on her sweet 16, me in the background making sure everyone had enough cake. My youngest, David, graduating from Northwestern, me crying tears of pride in the audience. In every photo, I was there. Always there. Always giving. Always loving. But now, apparently, I wasn't even worth a wedding invitation. I remember the scent of Michael's cologne from when he was 16, mixing with the sweetness of birthday cake batter I'd beaten by hand because our mixer had broken. I remember the weight of his head on my shoulder when he cried about his first heartbreak. I remember driving through Chicago traffic in a snowstorm to get him medicine when he had the flu his sophomore year of college. I was family then. I was needed then. I was wanted then. But now? Now I wasn't even a guest. Let me tell you about the years that led to that moment. The years when I gave everything I had, thinking that love was a one-way street and that being a mother meant accepting whatever scraps of affection my children were willing to throw my way. After my husband Frank died 5 years ago, I thought my children would step up. I thought they would want to take care of me the way I had taken care of them. I thought they would see me as someone worth protecting, worth including, worth loving. Instead, I became the family ATM. Mom, we need help with the down payment on the house, Michael would say over the phone, his voice rushed and impatient. Just a loan. We'll pay you back. I handed over $12,000 from Frank's life insurance. They never paid me back. When I asked about it 6 months later, Michael sighed like I was bothering him with trivial details. Mom, you don't understand how expensive it is to maintain a house in Lincoln Park. We're barely getting by. Meanwhile, I was eating generic cereal for dinner and wearing the same 3 sweaters because I couldn't afford to buy new clothes. Mom, the roof is leaking after that hailstorm, Sarah would call, crying into the phone. The insurance won't cover everything. Can you help us? Just this once? I sent $8,000. My pension check for 4 months. I ate peanut butter sandwiches for weeks and told myself it was worth it because family takes care of family. But when my arthritis flared up and I could barely open a jar of pickles, when I mentioned that my apartment's heat had been turned off because I was behind on bills, when I asked if maybe I could come for dinner because I hadn't had a real meal in days, the response was always the same. Mom, we're so busy right now. Mom, the kids have soccer practice. Mom, you don't understand how stressful our lives are. Frank used to tell me I was too generous, too forgiving. Eleanor, those kids need to learn to stand on their own 2 feet, he'd say while reading the Tribune at our kitchen table. You're not helping them by giving them everything they ask for. But Frank didn't understand. Frank was a man. He didn't know what it felt like to have your whole identity wrapped up in being needed, in being useful, in being the one who fixed everything and made everything better. After he died, that need became even stronger. I needed to feel like I mattered. I needed to believe that my children still loved me, even if they only called when they needed something. You're being too sensitive, I told myself when Michael forgot my birthday. You're being too needy, I whispered when Sarah didn't return my calls for 3 weeks. You're being too demanding, I thought when David moved to Portland and didn't tell me his new address. But the manipulation was subtle, designed to make me question my own reality. Michael would call me dramatic when I got upset about being excluded from family gatherings. Sarah would say I was guilt-tripping her when I mentioned feeling lonely. David would accuse me of being controlling when I asked if I could visit. You don't understand how things work now, Mom, became their favorite phrase. As if love had changed since they were children. As if respect had an expiration date. As if being 73 meant I was no longer entitled to basic human decency. I started to wonder if I was losing my mind. If I was the problem. If I was the toxic one poisoning the well of family happiness. Maybe they were right. Maybe I was too much. Maybe I expected too much. Maybe I was the burden they all said I was becoming. The forgiveness I offered became chains around my neck instead of bridges between our hearts. Every time they hurt me and I said, it's okay, every time they disappointed me and I made excuses for them, every time they used me and I pretended not to notice, I was teaching them that I didn't value myself. And if I didn't value myself, why should they? I questioned everything. Was I really being used, or was I just a bitter old woman who couldn't accept that her children had lives of their own? Was I really being manipulated, or was I just lonely and desperate for attention? Was I really being disrespected, or was I just too old-fashioned to understand modern family dynamics? The doubt ate at me like cancer, spreading through every memory, every conversation, every interaction until I couldn't tell the difference between love and exploitation anymore. But then came the birthdays that went uncelebrated. The Christmases that passed without a single phone call. The Mother's Days that were acknowledged with a generic text message sent at 11:47 p.m., as if they suddenly remembered I existed. I became the invisible mother, the ghost haunting the edges of their busy, important lives. They posted photos on Facebook of family gatherings I wasn't invited to. They shared stories of Sunday dinners I wasn't welcome at. They celebrated milestones I only heard about through social media posts. When the flu hit me hard last winter and I was bedridden for a week, no one called to check on me. I ran out of soup, out of medicine, out of hope. I lay in my bed listening to the L trains and wondering if anyone would even notice if I died. Mrs. Hernandez from downstairs, a woman I'd only spoken to in passing, knocked on my door with homemade chicken soup and stayed to make sure I ate it. A stranger showed me more kindness in one afternoon than my own children had shown me in months. When the arthritis in my hands got so bad that I couldn't open jars or bottles, when simple tasks like buttoning my coat became monumentally difficult, I mentioned it during one of Michael's rare phone calls. Mom, you should get one of those jar opener things from Amazon, he said dismissively. Listen, I have to go. Ashley's calling. No offer to help. No concern for my pain. No acknowledgement that his 73-year-old mother was struggling with basic daily tasks. But then came the day that changed everything. The day that shattered whatever illusions I had left about my place in my children's lives. My neighbor, Mrs. Chen, who I sometimes chat with at the mailboxes, called me with news she'd seen on a local real estate blog. Eleanor, honey, have you seen this? Your son Michael just bought a condo in Streeterville. One of those fancy high-rises by the lake. The article says it cost him $800,000. My hands started shaking as she talked. $800,000. Michael, who had been telling me for months that money was tight, that they could barely afford their mortgage, that they needed my help just to get by, had somehow come up with $800,000 for a luxury condo. I hung up the phone and sat in my wobbly chair, staring at the cracked plaster ceiling of my studio apartment. All those times I'd sent money. All those times I'd sacrificed my own comfort to help them out. All those times I'd eaten crackers for dinner so I could help pay for their roof, their down payment, their vacation, their wedding. They didn't need my money. They needed my money to feel superior. They needed my money to have someone they could look down on. They needed my money to maintain the fiction that they were successful while someone else footed the bill. I felt something break inside my chest, something that had been holding together through sheer force of will and maternal love. My coffee cup slipped from my trembling fingers and shattered on the linoleum floor, brown liquid spreading in a puddle that looked like the tears I couldn't cry anymore. I knelt down to clean up the mess, my arthritis screaming in protest, and as I picked up the sharp pieces of ceramic, I thought about how fitting it was. Everything was broken. Everything was in pieces. Everything I had believed about love and family and sacrifice was scattered on the floor like fragments of cheap porcelain. That night, I did something I hadn't done in years. I pulled out the old photo albums Frank and I had kept so carefully, the ones documenting every birthday party, every Christmas morning, every family vacation. I sat on my bed surrounded by pictures of a life that felt like it belonged to someone else. There I was, always in the background, always serving, always giving. Frank carving the turkey while I carried plates. The kids opening presents while I cleaned up wrapping paper. Michael graduating while I beamed with pride from the audience, clutching a bouquet of flowers he never acknowledged. In every photo, I was the supporting character in my own life story. I picked up one photo from Michael's 8th birthday party. He was blowing out candles on a dinosaur cake I'd spent 6 hours decorating by hand, staying up until 2 in the morning to get the frosting just right. His face was lit up with pure joy, and I was kneeling beside him, making sure he didn't set his hair on fire. I had loved him so much in that moment. I had been so proud to be his mother, so grateful to be the one who could make him that happy. Where had that little boy gone? When had he turned into someone who could look at me with such cold indifference and tell me I didn't belong in his life because I didn't earn a paycheck? I closed the photo albums and put them away in the bottom drawer of my dresser, under the winter clothes I couldn't afford to get dry cleaned. Some memories were too painful to keep looking at. I walked to the small mirror hanging by my front door, the one with a crack running down the left side like a scar. The woman staring back at me looked older than 73. Her gray hair was thin and unkempt. Her blue eyes, once bright with hope and purpose, looked hollow and defeated. Her shoulders sagged under the weight of decades of unappreciated sacrifice. I didn't recognize myself anymore. When had I become this person? When had I allowed myself to shrink so small that I could be erased from family photos and wedding invitations without anyone thinking twice? A thought surfaced in my mind, dangerous and terrifying and completely foreign to everything I had been taught about being a good mother. What if I said no? What if I stopped answering every call for help? What if I stopped giving money I couldn't afford to give? What if I stopped accepting crumbs of affection and demanding a seat at the table instead? But the fear crashed over me immediately. If I stopped giving, would they stop calling altogether? If I stopped being useful, would I become completely invisible? If I stood up for myself, would I end up completely alone? The loneliness was already crushing me. The thought of making it worse, of cutting the few thin threads that still connected me to my children, felt unbearable. But so did the humiliation. So did the exploitation. So did the constant ache of being treated like a stranger by the people I had given my life to raise. I stood in front of that cracked mirror for a long time that night, wrestling with a question I'd never allowed myself to ask before. Was it better to be alone with dignity, or connected without respect? I didn't know the answer yet. But for the first time in my life, I was brave enough to wonder. The next morning, I woke up with a headache and a decision I wasn't sure I was strong enough to make. But sometimes, when you've been pushed as far as you can go, strength isn't about what you can handle anymore. It's about what you refuse to accept. 3 days later, Michael called. Not to check on me, not to apologize for the wedding invitation, not to see how I was doing. He called because he needed money. "Mom, Ashley's student loans are killing us," he said without even a hello. "The interest rate is insane. Can you help us pay them off? Just $20,000. We'll pay you back." $20,000. My entire savings account. The emergency fund I'd been building for 5 years in case I got sick or needed help. In the past, I would have said yes without thinking. I would have transferred the money that day and told myself I was being a good mother. Instead, I heard myself say something that surprised us both. "No." The silence on the other end of the phone lasted so long I thought he'd hung up. "No," he repeated, like he'd never heard the word before. "No, Michael. I can't help you this time. Can't or won't." The edge in his voice was sharp enough to cut glass. This was not the tone of a son asking his mother for a favor. This was the tone of an employer demanding compliance from an employee. "Won't," I said quietly. "I won't help you this time." "Jesus, Mom. What's gotten into you? We're family. Family helps each other." "You're right," I said, my voice getting steadier with each word. "Family does help each other. When was the last time you helped me?" We don't have time for this guilt trip, he snapped. Ashley and I work 60 hours a week. We have real responsibilities. And I don't? Mom, you're retired. You sit around all day. We're building careers, trying to make something of ourselves. The words hit like physical blows. Sit around all day. As if dealing with chronic pain and loneliness and financial stress wasn't work. As if being 73 meant my time had no value. As if my decades of sacrifice meant nothing now that I couldn't contribute to their bank accounts. I raised 3 children, I said. I took care of your father through cancer. I worked 40 years as a nurse, helping people who couldn't help themselves. I think I made something of myself a long time ago. That's different, Michael said dismissively. That was your job. This is about helping your family when we need it. It was my job to love you and raise you, I said. It wasn't my job to fund your lifestyle for the rest of my life. Fine, he said, and I could hear Ashley saying something in the background. Be selfish. But don't expect us to keep pretending everything's normal if you're going to act like this. The threat was clear. Play by their rules or lose access to their lives. For 73 years, I had been terrified of that ultimatum. For 73 years, I had chosen connection over respect, relationship over dignity. Okay, I said. Okay, what? Okay, I won't expect anything to be normal. Because this isn't normal, Michael. None of this is normal. I hung up the phone before he could respond. My hands were shaking, but not from fear this time. From something that felt like relief. For the first time in decades, I had chosen myself. The phone rang again immediately. I didn't answer it. It rang 12 more times over the next hour. I didn't answer any of them. That afternoon, I did something I hadn't done in 5 years. I took money out of my savings account and spent it on myself. Not on groceries or bills or necessities. On myself. I went to a salon in Little Italy and got my hair cut and styled. I bought a new sweater at a boutique on North Avenue, something in a soft blue that made my eyes look brighter. I stopped at a small cafe and ordered coffee and a pastry, sitting by the window and watching people walk by without worrying about the cost. For the first time in my adult life, I spent money on something I wanted instead of something someone else needed. That night, I slept better than I had in months. No one had called to demand anything from me. No one had made me feel guilty for existing. No one had measured my worth by the size of my bank balance. I was alone, but I wasn't lonely. There's a difference, I was learning. The next morning, I called the community center in Pilsen and asked about their art classes. The woman on the phone was so kind, so welcoming, that I almost cried. We have a wonderful watercolor class on Tuesday mornings, she said. It's specifically designed for seniors. Very relaxed, very supportive. You should come check it out. I hadn't held a paintbrush in 30 years, but something about the idea excited me in a way I hadn't felt excited about anything in a long time. That Tuesday, I took the L to Pilsen, nervous and hopeful and terrified all at once. The community center was warm and bright, full of the kind of energy that comes from people doing things they love instead of things they have to do. The art teacher, Maria, was a young woman with paint-stained fingers and a smile that made me feel instantly welcome. Are you Eleanor? She asked. I'm so glad you came. We're working on landscapes today, but you can paint whatever speaks to you. Whatever speaks to me. When was the last time anyone had cared about what spoke to me? I sat at a small table with a canvas and a palette of colors that seemed to glow under the fluorescent lights. Blue like Lake Michigan on a clear day. Yellow like the sunflowers Frank used to grow in our backyard. Green like the leaves on the old oak tree where my children used to play. My hands were stiff from arthritis, but as I dipped the brush in paint and made the first stroke across the canvas, something loosened in my chest. The colors flowed together in ways I hadn't expected, creating something that looked like hope. The other students were kind and encouraging. Margaret, a widow from Bridgeport, showed me how to blend colors without making them muddy. Robert, a retired teacher from the North Side, shared stories that made me laugh for the first time in weeks. Nobody asked me for money. Nobody made me feel guilty for taking up space. Nobody treated me like I was invisible or burdensome or worthless. They saw me as a person worth knowing, worth including, worth respecting. After class, I walked to the legal aid office that Maria had mentioned, the one that helped seniors understand their rights and navigate financial issues. The advocate there, a patient woman named Carmen, listened to my story without judgment and helped me understand that I had been financially exploited. What your children are doing has a name, she said gently. It's called elder financial abuse, and it's more common than you might think. You have the right to say no to their requests. You have the right to protect your own financial security. Hearing it named, hearing it validated, gave me strength I didn't know I possessed. That night, I called Sarah. Mom, thank God, she said when she heard my voice. Michael told me about your conversation. I think you're going through something. Maybe depression? Maybe we should talk about getting you some help. The manipulation was so smooth, so automatic, that I almost fell back into the old pattern of self-doubt. But Carmen's words echoed in my mind. This had a name. This was real. I wasn't imagining it. I'm not depressed, Sarah. I'm done. Done with what? Done pretending that being treated badly is the price I have to pay for being your mother. Mom, nobody's treating you badly. We're just busy. We have our own lives. You have your own lives, but you don't have any problem including me when you need something from me. That's not fair. Isn't it? When was the last time you called me just to talk? When was the last time you invited me to dinner? When was the last time you asked how I was doing and actually listened to the answer? Sarah was quiet for a long moment. Then, we invited you to David's birthday party last month. No, you didn't. Yes, we did. I sent you a text. You sent me a text 2 hours before the party saying I could come if I brought the cake and stayed to help clean up. That's not an invitation, Sarah. That's asking me to work your party for free. You're twisting everything around. I'm seeing everything clearly for the first time in years. Mom, you're scaring me. This isn't like you. She was right. This wasn't like me. The old me would have backed down by now, apologized for causing trouble, sent flowers to make peace. But the old me had been miserable. The old me had been used and discarded and forgotten. The old me had been slowly disappearing until there was almost nothing left. Maybe it's time I became more like me and less like what you all wanted me to be, I said. We just want you to be reasonable. I am being reasonable. I'm being reasonable about what I deserve and what I'm willing to accept. Mom, please. Can't we just have a nice conversation? I don't want to fight with you. Neither do I, sweetheart. But I'm not going to pretend anymore that everything is fine when it isn't. What do you want from us? The question caught me off guard. What did I want? After so many years of giving and serving and sacrificing, I'd almost forgotten that I was allowed to want things. I want to be treated like I matter, I said finally. I want to be included in things that don't require me to pay for the privilege. I want to be called something other than when you need money. I want to be respected for who I am, not just what I can do for you. That's not. I mean, we do respect you. Do you? Would you talk to anyone else the way you talk to me? Would you ignore anyone else for weeks at a time? Would you ask anyone else to give you thousands of dollars and then disappear until you needed more? Sarah started crying. Mom, I don't know what you want me to say. I don't want you to say anything. I want you to think about how you've been treating me and decide if that's how you want to treat someone you love. After I hung up, I felt exhausted but also strangely energized. It was like I'd been holding my breath for years and finally remembered how to exhale. Over the next few weeks, the pattern continued. Michael called to yell at me for poisoning Sarah against the family. David called from Portland to tell me I was being dramatic and that I should apologize to everyone before I ruined the family permanently. But something had shifted inside me. Their anger didn't devastate me the way it used to. Their threats didn't terrify me into compliance. Their guilt trips rolled off me like rain off a roof. I kept going to art class. I kept meeting with Carmen at the legal aid office. I kept saying no to requests for money. And slowly, gradually, I started to remember who I was when I wasn't defined by other people's needs. I was Eleanor Margaret Walsh. I was a retired nurse who had saved lives and comforted families and made the world a little better every day for 40 years. I was a widow who had nursed her husband through cancer with grace and strength. I was an artist who could paint sunsets that made other people smile. I was a woman who deserved respect and kindness and love. I was not a bank account with legs. I was not a convenient solution to other people's problems. I was not a supporting character in my own life story. For the first time in decades, I was becoming the protagonist of my own life. But then came Thanksgiving. Sarah called on a Tuesday morning, her voice bright and artificially cheerful. Mom, we're having Thanksgiving at my house this year. Can you come? The invitation surprised me. After weeks of tense phone calls and cold shoulders, I hadn't expected to be included in anything. What changed? I asked. Nothing changed. We miss you. We want you there. Something in her tone made me suspicious, but I was lonely enough and hopeful enough to accept. Should I bring anything? Just yourself, Sarah said. We've got everything covered. On Thanksgiving morning, I put on my navy dress, the one I'd bought for Michael's wedding before I was uninvited. I took the L to Sarah's house in Lincoln Square, carrying a small bouquet of flowers from the corner store and a bottle of wine I'd bought with my art class friends in mind. The house was beautiful, warm, and inviting in a way that made me remember what family gatherings used to feel like. Michael was there with Ashley, looking uncomfortable but civil. David had flown in from Portland, his new girlfriend clinging to his arm and looking around like she was afraid to touch anything. At first, everything seemed normal. We made small talk about the weather and the traffic and the football game playing on the television. Sarah had cooked a beautiful meal, the dining room table set with her good china and crystal glasses that caught the light from the chandelier. But as we sat down to eat, I noticed that there was tension humming under the surface of all the polite conversation. Quick glances between my children. Private smiles that didn't include me. A sense that everyone was performing their part in a play I hadn't been given the script for. Halfway through dinner, Michael cleared his throat. "Mom, we wanted to talk to you about something." Here it was. The reason for the invitation, the agenda behind the artificial warmth. "We've been thinking," Sarah added, "about your financial situation." "My financial situation is fine," I said carefully. "Mom, we know you're struggling," David said. "Living in that tiny apartment, skipping meals, wearing the same clothes over and over. We want to help." I looked around the table at their concerned faces, trying to figure out the angle. "Help how?" "We found a really nice assisted living facility," Ashley said, speaking up for the first time since I'd arrived. "It's clean and safe, and they provide all your meals. You wouldn't have to worry about bills or maintenance or any of that stuff." "I don't need assisted living," I said. "I'm perfectly capable of taking care of myself." "Are you?" Michael asked. "Because from where we're sitting, it looks like you're barely getting by. And that apartment you're living in? Mom, it's not safe. The neighborhood, the building, none of it is appropriate for someone your age." The condescension in his voice made my teeth clench. "What does my age have to do with anything?" "You're 73, Sarah said gently. "You shouldn't be living alone in a place like that. You should be somewhere with people who can look out for you." "People are looking out for me," I said. "My neighbors, my friends from art class, the people at the community center." "Art class?" David laughed. "Mom, you can't build a support system around a hobby." "Why not? Those people care more about my well-being than any of you do." The words hung in the air like smoke from a fire, acrid and unavoidable. "That's not true," Sarah said, but her voice lacked conviction. "Isn't it? When was the last time any of you checked on me without wanting something from me?" "We're checking on you now," Michael said. "No, you're trying to get rid of me now. There's a difference." "Mom, we're trying to help you," Ashley said. "This facility we found is really nice. It has activities and social opportunities. You'd make friends." "I have friends." "Real friends," David said. "Not just people you see once a week at some community center." The dismissal of my relationships, my choices, my entire life outside of their control, sent a spike of anger through my chest. "How would you know who my real friends are?" I asked. "How would any of you know anything about my life? You never ask." "We ask," Sarah protested. When do you ask?" "We call you." "You call when you need money or when you feel guilty that you haven't called. That's not the same thing as caring about my life." I could see them exchanging those looks again, the silent communication of people who had planned this conversation in advance. "Mom," Michael said, his voice taking on the patient tone he might use with a difficult client, "we think you might be getting a little paranoid. A little suspicious of people's motives. That happens sometimes with age." There it was. The suggestion that my perception of reality was compromised, that my feelings were symptoms of decline rather than reasonable responses to their behavior. "I'm not paranoid," I said quietly. "I'm awake." "What does that mean?" "It means I'm finally seeing clearly how I've been treated. It means I'm finally understanding that loving someone doesn't mean accepting whatever they're willing to give you." "Mom, everybody here loves you," Sarah said, tears starting to form in her eyes. "Do you? When you love someone, do you invite them to family gatherings just to ambush them with accusations about their mental capacity? When you love someone, do you only call them when you need something? When you love someone, do you exclude them from weddings and birthdays and holidays?" "We didn't exclude you from the wedding," Ashley said. "We just had limited space." "Limited space for the woman who gave birth to your fiancé and contributed $7,000 to your dream wedding?" "You didn't have to give us that money," Michael said. "No, I didn't. But I did it because I thought I was supporting my son's happiness. I thought I was being included in the most important day of his life. Instead, I was being used to pay for a party I wasn't welcome to attend." The silence that followed was so thick I could hear the grandfather clock in Sarah's hallway ticking. "Mom," David said finally, "I think you need to consider that maybe your perspective is a little skewed." "My perspective is skewed?" "You're interpreting everything in the most negative way possible." "Am I? Or are you all pretending that your behavior has been more loving than it actually has been?" I reached into my purse and pulled out the old family photo I'd been carrying with me, the one from Michael's 8th birthday party. I set it on the table in front of them. Do you remember this day? I asked. They all looked at the photo, their faces softening slightly with nostalgia. Of course, Sarah said. Michael's dinosaur birthday party. I spent 6 hours decorating that cake, I said. I stayed up until 2 in the morning making sure every detail was perfect because I wanted my 8-year-old son to have the best birthday party in the world. It was a great party, Michael said quietly. It was? And do you know why? Because I made it my priority to make you happy. Because I cared more about your joy than my own convenience or comfort or sleep. I picked up the photo and held it for a moment, looking at the woman I used to be, the mother who had loved so completely and unconditionally. Then, deliberately, I tore the photo in half. The sound of ripping paper seemed to echo in the sudden silence. Mom, what are you doing? Sarah gasped. I'm stopping, I said, placing the 2 halves of the photo back on the table. I'm stopping the pretense that love only flows in one direction in this family. I'm stopping the myth that being a mother means accepting whatever scraps of affection you're willing to throw my way. You're being dramatic, David said, but his voice lacked its earlier confidence. I'm being honest. For the first time in years, I'm being completely honest. I stood up from the table, my legs steadier than I'd expected them to be. I raised 3 children to be independent, successful, capable adults. I did my job. I did it well. I loved you completely and unconditionally for decades, and I have no regrets about that. Mom, please sit down, Sarah pleaded. But I will not spend what's left of my life begging for basic respect from the people I sacrificed everything to raise. I will not pay for the privilege of being ignored and dismissed and excluded. I will not pretend that being related to you gives you the right to treat me badly. Nobody's treating you badly, Michael said, but the words sounded hollow even to him. Really? Would you treat a friend the way you've treated me? Would you speak to a coworker the way you speak to me? Would you ask a neighbor for thousands of dollars and then disappear until you needed more? None of them answered. I love you, I said, and I meant it. I love all of you. But I love myself too, and I'm finally ready to act like it. What does that mean? Ashley asked. It means I will no longer be available to fund your lifestyle. It means I will no longer be available to be your emotional dumping ground when you're stressed. It means I will no longer accept being treated like a convenience rather than a person. Mom, you're talking about cutting us out of your life, Sarah said, her tears flowing freely now. No, sweetheart. I'm talking about setting boundaries. There's a difference. What boundaries? Respect me or lose me, I said simply. Treat me like someone you actually love, or leave me alone. I walked toward the front door, the sound of my heels on Sarah's hardwood floors marking a rhythm that felt like a drumbeat, like a march, like the soundtrack to my own liberation. Mom, wait, Michael called after me. I turned back to look at them, my 3 children sitting around that beautiful table looking shocked and confused and maybe, for the first time in years, a little afraid of losing something they'd taken for granted. When you're ready to have a relationship built on mutual respect instead of one-sided exploitation, I said, you know where to find me. I walked out into the Chicago evening, the November air sharp and clean in my lungs. Behind me, I could hear voices rising, arguing, probably trying to figure out how to manage this new version of their mother. I didn't care. For the first time in my adult life, I was more interested in my own emotional well-being than in managing their reactions to my boundaries. I took the L back to my small apartment, and as the train rattled through neighborhoods full of people living their own complicated lives, I felt something I hadn't experienced in years. I felt proud of myself. But the peace didn't last long. 2 weeks after Thanksgiving, just when I was starting to settle into a new routine of art classes and community center activities and quiet evenings without the anxiety of waiting for someone to need something from me, Michael called. Mom, I wanted to let you know that we're having a family reunion next month, he said, his voice carefully neutral. Okay, I said, waiting for the other shoe to drop. It's going to be at Sarah's house. All the cousins are coming, all the aunts and uncles. It's going to be really special. That sounds nice. Yeah, well, the thing is, Ashley and I have been talking, and we think it might be better if you don't come. The words hit me like a physical blow, but I kept my voice steady. Why? After what happened at Thanksgiving, we just don't want any drama. This is supposed to be a celebration, and frankly, your attitude lately has been really negative and disruptive. My attitude. My negativity. My disruption of their perfectly orchestrated family happiness. I see. We're going to tell everyone that you couldn't make it because of health issues. That way nobody has to know about all this. They were going to lie about me. They were going to erase me from the family narrative and make up a story that positioned them as caring children dealing with a difficult mother. What health issues? I asked. Just general stuff. Age-related decline. You know. Age-related decline. As if standing up for myself was a symptom of dementia rather than a sign of finally developing some self-respect. Michael, I said, let me ask you something. If I called you and told you that you couldn't come to a family gathering because your attitude was too negative, how would you feel? That's different. How is it different? It just is. Look, Mom, I don't want to argue with you. I just wanted to give you a heads up so you don't accidentally show up or anything. The casual cruelty of it took my breath away. They weren't just excluding me, they were protecting themselves against the possibility that I might have the audacity to show up uninvited to a family event. Don't worry, I said. I won't accidentally show up anywhere I'm not wanted. Good. Maybe after some time passes, after you've had a chance to think about things, we can talk about you rejoining the family activities. Rejoining the family activities. As if I were a member who had been suspended for bad behavior, someone who needed to earn my way back into their good graces. Michael, I said, I am your mother. I don't need to earn my way back into the family. I am the family. You're acting like you don't want to be part of the family. I'm acting like I expect to be treated with basic human decency by the family. Whatever, Mom. I've said what I needed to say. After he hung up, I sat in my chair for a long time, staring at the afternoon sun slanting through my small window. The hurt was sharp and deep, but underneath it was something else. Something that felt like clarity. They were never going to change. They were never going to wake up one day and realize how badly they'd been treating me. They were never going to apologize or make amends or suddenly start valuing my presence in their lives. The fantasy I'd been holding on to, the dream that somehow I could love them into loving me back the way I deserved to be loved, was never going to become reality. But that didn't mean I had to keep participating in my own diminishment. That evening, I called Carmen at the legal aid office. Eleanor, how are you? I'm ready to make some changes, I said. What kind of changes? I want to update my will. I want to make sure that my money goes to organizations that will use it to help people who actually need help, not to fund the lifestyles of people who see me as a convenient ATM. Are you sure about this? I'm sure. I want to leave everything to the community center, the legal aid clinic, maybe the local food bank. Places that make a difference for people who don't have other options. Carmen was quiet for a moment. Eleanor, I have to ask. Are you doing this out of anger, or are you doing this because it's what you really want? Both, I said honestly. But mostly because it's the right thing to do. My children don't need my money. They've made that clear by the way they've treated me. But there are people out there who do need help, and I'd rather my life savings go to them. Okay. Let me schedule an appointment for you with one of our estate planning attorneys. After I hung up, I felt a strange sense of peace. For so many years, I'd thought of my money as a way to stay connected to my children, as leverage to ensure they would keep me in their lives. But it had never worked that way. The money hadn't bought me love or respect or inclusion. It had just made me useful temporarily, a resource to be exploited and then ignored until the next crisis arose. Now, finally, I was going to use my money for something that would actually matter. But the universe wasn't done testing my resolve. 3 days later, Sarah showed up at my apartment building, her face streaked with tears and her hands shaking. Mom, please, she said when I opened the door. We need to talk. About what? About Michael. About the family reunion. About all of this. Against my better judgment, I let her in. She sat on my small couch, looking around at my Spartan apartment with something that might have been guilt or might have been pity. Mom, I'm sorry, she said. I'm sorry about the way things have been. I'm sorry Michael said you couldn't come to the reunion. I'm sorry we've made you feel unwelcome. The apology felt both genuine and calculated, heartfelt and strategic. Thank you, I said carefully. I want you to know that I never meant for any of this to happen. When we asked you for money or help over the years, I never thought of it as using you. I thought of it as what families do for each other. And when I asked for help? When I needed support or companionship or just a phone call? What did you think of that as? Sarah's face crumpled. I don't know. I guess I thought you were fine. I thought you were strong enough to handle anything. I was strong enough. But that doesn't mean I should have had to handle everything alone. You're right. You're absolutely right, and I'm sorry. She reached into her purse and pulled out her phone. Look, I want to show you something. She opened Facebook and scrolled to a post from 3 days earlier. It was Michael, posting photos from what looked like a family gathering. The caption read, "So grateful for family unity and the bonds that hold us together through everything. Some people try to bring negativity into our lives, but we choose love over drama every time." Hashtag family first, hashtag blessed, hashtag choose love. The photos showed Michael and Ashley, David and his girlfriend, Sarah and her husband, several cousins I recognized, and my brother Paul with his wife. Everyone was smiling, everyone looked happy and connected and complete. I was the some people bringing negativity. I was the drama they were choosing love over. Sarah, I said quietly, why are you showing me this? Because I want you to see how he's twisting everything. Making it look like you're the problem when we're the ones who have been treating you badly. But you all agreed to exclude me from that gathering. I know. And I regret it. But Michael posted this to make it look like excluding you was this noble stand against toxicity instead of what it really was. Which was what? Cowardice. We were afraid of having to confront how we've been acting, so we decided it was easier to blame you for pointing it out. I stared at the photos, at the faces of people I'd loved and supported and sacrificed for, all of them participating in a narrative that painted me as the villain in my own life story. Sarah, why are you telling me this? Because I love you. And because what we've been doing is wrong. What are you going to do about it? I don't know. I want to make things right, but I don't know how. You could start by taking down that post. I can't do that. It's not my post. You could comment on it. You could tell the truth about what really happened. Sarah's face went pale. Mom, I can't do that. It would cause so much drama in the family. And there it was. The real truth. She was sorry, she felt guilty, she knew what they'd done was wrong, but she wasn't willing to risk her own standing in the family to defend me. Her apology was real, but it was also worthless. It was the kind of private regret that absolved her of guilt without requiring her to take any concrete action to make things right. Sarah, I said, I appreciate you coming here. I appreciate you acknowledging that what happened was wrong. But an apology that doesn't come with changed behavior isn't really an apology. It's just an attempt to feel better about yourself without actually having to do anything different. That's not fair. Isn't it? You're sitting here telling me you're sorry while Michael's lies about me are still posted on social media for all our family and friends to see. You're asking me to accept your private regret while allowing the public humiliation to stand. I just don't want to cause more problems. You don't want to cause problems for yourself. You're fine with the problems being caused for me. Sarah started crying again. Mom, what do you want me to do? I want you to decide whether you're going to be part of the solution or part of the problem. I want you to decide whether you're going to stand up for what's right or continue to enable what's wrong. It's not that simple. Yes, it is. It's exactly that simple. She left a few minutes later, promising to think about what I'd said, promising to try to make things better, promising to call soon. I knew she wouldn't do any of those things. She would go home and tell her husband about our conversation, and he would tell her she was right to stay out of it, and she would convince herself that staying neutral was the kindest option for everyone involved. But I was done with kind lies and gentle betrayals. I was done with people who claimed to love me but weren't willing to defend me. I was done with promises that were never intended to be kept. That night, I sat down at my small table and wrote letters. One to Michael, one to Sarah, one to David. I told them exactly how their behavior had affected me, exactly what I needed from them to continue having a relationship, and exactly what would happen if they chose to continue treating me badly. The letters were clear and direct and completely free of the apologetic tone I'd used for so many years when asking for basic respect. I wasn't asking anymore. I was stating my requirements. I mailed the letters the next morning, and then I did something I'd never done in my entire life. I stopped caring what their response would be. For 73 years, I had shaped my behavior around other people's reactions. I had said what I thought they wanted to hear, done what I thought would make them happy, given what I thought would make them love me. But love that has to be bought isn't love at all. It's a transaction. And I was finally ready to stop paying for something I was never actually receiving. The letters went unanswered for 2 weeks. Then, on a Thursday afternoon, my phone rang. It was Michael, and he was furious. Mom, what the hell was that letter supposed to accomplish? It was supposed to communicate clearly what I need from you if we're going to continue having a relationship. It was a list of demands and ultimatums. It was a list of boundaries and consequences. You can't just decide unilaterally how our relationship is going to work. I can decide unilaterally how I'm going to allow people to treat me. That's not how family works. How does family work, Michael? Because from where I'm standing, it looks like family means I give and you take, I sacrifice and you benefit, I forgive and you continue hurting me. You're being totally unreasonable. I'm being totally clear. Respect me or lose me. Those are your options. Fine, he said, and I could hear Ashley in the background again, coaching him through this conversation the way she'd probably coached him through all of his interactions with me. If that's how you want it to be, then we'll lose you. Don't call us anymore. Don't send us letters. Don't try to contact us at all. You've made your choice. Yes, I said. I have. He hung up without saying goodbye. An hour later, Sarah called. Mom, Michael told me what happened. Are you really going to let this destroy our family? Sarah, I didn't destroy anything. I just stopped pretending that what we had was actually a family. What does that mean? It means families are supposed to be built on love and respect and mutual support. What we had was built on me giving and all of you taking. That's not a family. That's exploitation with a genetic component. Mom, I know we haven't been perfect, but you haven't been close to perfect. You've been using me for years, and the only reason you're upset now is because I finally said no. That's not true. Isn't it? When was the last time any of you called me just to see how I was doing? When was the last time any of you invited me to something without expecting me to pay for it or work at it? When was the last time any of you treated me like someone whose feelings mattered? Sarah couldn't answer. I love you, I said. I love all of you. But I'm done being your convenient solution to problems you don't want to solve yourselves. I'm done being your emotional dumping ground. I'm done being treated like I'm lucky to get whatever scraps of attention you're willing to throw my way. Mom, please. We can work this out. We can work it out if you're willing to acknowledge how you've been treating me and commit to doing better. But I'm not going to keep having the same conversation over and over while nothing actually changes. What do you want us to do? I want you to read my letter and take it seriously. I want you to think about whether you actually want a relationship with me or whether you just want to keep me available for when you need something. I want you to decide whether you're willing to treat me like a person you love or whether you'd rather just pretend I don't exist. Of course, we want a relationship with you. Then act like it. But if you can't, that's okay too. I'd rather be alone than be constantly disappointed by people I love who don't love me back. After we hung up, I felt hollow but also relieved. I'd said everything I needed to say. I'd been as clear as I could possibly be. The choice was theirs now, and whatever they decided, I would be okay. Because for the first time in my life, I was more committed to my own well-being than to their comfort. 2 days later, David called from Portland. Mom, I got your letter. Okay. I think you're being really unfair to all of us. How so? We're not perfect, but we're not the monsters you're making us out to be either. David, I never called you monsters. I said you've been treating me badly, and I'm not willing to accept that treatment anymore. But you're threatening to cut us out of your life over normal family stuff. Is it normal to exclude your mother from family gatherings? Is it normal to only call your mother when you need money? Is it normal to ignore your mother when she's sick or lonely or struggling? Mom, we have our own lives. We have jobs and mortgages and responsibilities. So did I when you were growing up. But I still made time for you. I still made you a priority. I still made sure you felt loved and valued and important. That was your job as our parent. The words hung in the air like a slap. Is that what you think? That loving you was just a job I was obligated to do? I mean, yeah, kind of. Parents are supposed to take care of their kids. And kids are supposed to grow up into adults who care about their parents. But apparently that's optional. Mom, you're being dramatic again. David, let me ask you something. If I died tomorrow, what would you miss about me? The question caught him off guard. What kind of question is that? A simple one. What would you miss? What role have I played in your life over the past 5 years that would leave a hole if I was gone? He was quiet for a long moment. See? I said gently. You can't think of anything. Because I haven't been a person in your life. I've been a resource. And when resources aren't needed, they're stored away until the next time they're convenient. That's not. I mean, we'd miss you. Would you? Or would you miss having someone to call when you need money? Mom, that's cruel. Is it? Because from my perspective, what's cruel is being treated like I only matter when I'm useful. I don't know what you want me to say. I want you to tell me the truth. Do you actually enjoy talking to me? Do you actually want to spend time with me? Do you actually care about my thoughts and feelings and experiences? Or do I just represent a convenient solution to problems you don't want to solve yourself? Both, he said finally, and I had to give him credit for honesty. Then here's what I need you to understand, I said. I'm not available to be useful anymore unless I'm also valuable. I'm not available to solve your problems unless you're available to care about mine. I'm not available to be a part-time mother to part-time children. What does that mean? It means you get to choose. You can have a real relationship with me, one based on mutual care and respect. Or you can have no relationship with me at all. But you can't have whatever this has been, where you get all the benefits of having a mother without any of the responsibilities of being a son. Mom, you're asking us to choose between having you in our lives and having our independence. No, David. I'm asking you to choose between treating me well and losing access to me. Your independence was never in question. Your basic human decency is. We talked for another 20 minutes, going in circles, him trying to convince me that I was being unreasonable and me trying to help him understand that I was actually being reasonable for the first time in years. By the end of the conversation, nothing had been resolved, but everything had been clarified. He knew where I stood. He knew what his options were. He knew that the old version of his mother, the one who would accept any treatment as long as it meant staying connected, was gone forever. For the next month, my phone was silent. No calls, no texts, no contact of any kind from any of my children. At first, the silence was painful. I would find myself reaching for the phone to call one of them, then remembering that they had chosen to cut contact rather than treat me better. But gradually, the silence became peaceful. I wasn't waiting for calls that might not come. I wasn't analyzing text messages for hidden meanings. I wasn't walking on eggshells, afraid of saying the wrong thing and triggering another period of being ignored. I was free. I threw myself into my art classes, experimenting with oils and acrylics and finding that I had a talent I'd never known existed. My paintings started getting better, more confident, more expressive. I volunteered at the community center, helping serve lunch to seniors who were struggling financially. I met other women who had been through similar situations with their adult children, and we formed a support group that met every Wednesday evening. I started taking the bus to different neighborhoods in Chicago, exploring parts of the city I'd never seen, eating at small restaurants and visiting museums and attending free concerts and parks. I was living my life instead of just enduring it. And then, on a Tuesday morning in January, my phone rang. It was a number I didn't recognize, but the voice was familiar. Grandma? It's Anna. Anna. Sarah's youngest daughter, the one who had called me months earlier to apologize for the family's behavior. Anna, sweetheart. How are you? I'm okay. Grandma, I wanted to call you because I heard about everything that happened with Mom and Uncle Michael and Uncle David. What did you hear? I heard that they were being mean to you and that you decided not to talk to them anymore. Out of the mouths of babes. Anna was 16, old enough to cut through the adult complications and see the situation clearly. That's a simplified version, but it's not entirely wrong, I said. Grandma, I'm sorry. I'm sorry they were mean to you. Thank you, honey. That means more to me than you know. Can I ask you something? Of course. Are you okay? Like, are you happy? The question surprised me with its directness and its insight. You know what, Anna? I am happy. I'm happier than I've been in years. Good. Because Mom keeps saying you're probably sad and lonely and that you'll call when you're ready to apologize. Apologize for what? I don't know. For standing up for yourself, I think. I laughed, and it felt good to laugh about something that had caused me so much pain just a few months earlier. Anna, let me tell you something. I'm not lonely. I have friends now, real friends who like spending time with me just because they enjoy my company. I have hobbies and activities and things to look forward to. I have a life that belongs to me. That sounds really nice. It is really nice. And you know what the best part is? What? Nobody expects me to pay for the privilege of being included in it. Anna was quiet for a moment. Grandma, did we really treat you that badly? Your parents did, sweetie. You didn't. You were just a kid following the example the adults set. But I could have been nicer to you. I could have called you more. Anna, you were a child. It wasn't your responsibility to manage the adults' relationships with each other. I'm not a child anymore. No, you're not. And I'm so glad you called me today. Can I call you again? I would love that. But Anna, I need you to understand something. I'm not willing to be a secret. I'm not going to sneak around and hide our relationship from your parents. If you want to have a relationship with me, it has to be honest and open. What does that mean? It means you get to decide whether you want me in your life, but you don't get to hide that decision from your family to avoid conflict. And if your parents tell you that you can't talk to me, you'll have to decide whether you're going to obey them or think for yourself. I can think for myself. I believe you can. But it might not be easy. Grandma, can I tell you something? Anything. I think what you did was brave. I think standing up to them was the right thing to do, even though it made everyone upset. Why do you think that? Because nobody should have to accept being treated badly just to keep peace in the family. That's not peace. That's just pretending. Out of the mouths of babes, indeed. Anna and I talked for another hour, about art and school and books and life. She told me about the boy she had a crush on, about her plans for college, about the short story she was writing for English class. It was the kind of conversation I'd been craving for years, natural and easy and built on genuine interest rather than obligation. When we hung up, I realized something important. I hadn't lost my family. I'd lost some people who happened to be related to me. But the people who actually cared about me, who actually wanted to know me and spend time with me and treat me well, those people were still in my life. Family isn't just about genetics. Family is about love and respect and showing up for each other. And by that definition, I had more family now than I'd had in years. But the universe still had one more test for me. 3 weeks after Anna's call, I was walking home from the grocery store when I saw a familiar car parked outside my apartment building. It was Sarah's silver Honda, the one I'd ridden in countless times to family events and doctor's appointments and shopping trips. My heart started racing, but not with excitement. With dread. I climbed the stairs to my apartment slowly, giving myself time to prepare for whatever confrontation was waiting for me. But when I opened my door, Sarah wasn't there. Instead, there was an envelope that had been slipped under my door. Inside was a handwritten letter, 3 pages long, and a check for $15,000. Mom, the letter began, I know you don't want to hear from us right now, but I had to try one more time to fix this. I've been thinking about everything you said, and you're right. We have been treating you badly. We have been taking you for granted. We have been using you instead of loving you. I'm sorry. I'm so sorry. I want to make it right. The check is to pay you back for some of the money you gave us over the years. I know it's not everything, but it's a start. I want to have a real relationship with you again. I want to include you in our lives because we want you there, not because we need something from you. Can we try again? Can you give us another chance? I love you so much, and I miss you every day. Please call me. Please let me try to be the daughter you deserved all along. Love, Sarah. I sat on my couch holding the letter and the check, feeling a mix of emotions I couldn't untangle. Relief that someone had finally acknowledged how badly I'd been treated. Gratitude for the apology and the money. Hope that maybe, finally, things could be different. But also wariness. Also suspicion. Also the hard-earned wisdom that words are easy and patterns are stubborn. I thought about Anna's call, about her insight that the family dynamic wasn't really peace but pretending. I thought about all the times over the years that someone had apologized and promised to do better, only to fall back into the same patterns within weeks. I thought about the difference between regret and repentance, between feeling bad about consequences and actually changing behavior. And then I did something that 6 months earlier I never would have been strong enough to do. I deposited the check and filed the letter away without responding. Not because I didn't appreciate the apology or the money, but because I finally understood that my forgiveness didn't need to come with immediate availability. That accepting an apology didn't mean I had to instantly trust that things would be different. That I could love my daughter and still protect myself from falling back into patterns that had nearly destroyed my sense of self-worth. If Sarah was serious about changing, she would have to prove it over time with consistent actions, not just with one letter and one check. If she really wanted a relationship based on mutual respect, she would have to demonstrate that respect even when I didn't make it easy for her by immediately reopening the door. And if she wasn't serious, if this was just another manipulation designed to get me back into the old patterns, then my lack of response would reveal that truth soon enough. Either way, I would be okay. Because I had finally learned that being okay didn't depend on other people treating me well. It depended on me treating myself well, and that was something no one could take away from me anymore. Spring came to Chicago with its usual dramatic flair, winter surrendering to warmth in a matter of days rather than weeks. I decided to celebrate the season and my newfound freedom with something I'd never done in my entire life. I planned a trip for myself. Not to visit family or attend an obligation or accompany someone else on their adventure. A trip that was entirely about what I wanted to see and do and experience. I chose Door County, Wisconsin, because I'd always loved the idea of small lakeside towns and cherry blossoms and artist studios tucked away in converted barns. I booked a room and a bed and breakfast, rented a car for the first time since Frank died, and packed a suitcase with clothes that made me feel confident and attractive. The drive north through Wisconsin was beautiful, rolling farmland giving way to forests and lakes that sparkled in the spring sunshine. I stopped at roadside stands to buy fresh asparagus and early strawberries, chatted with vendors who seemed genuinely pleased to meet me, listened to music I'd forgotten I loved. Door County was everything I'd hoped it would be. Quaint without being kitschy, beautiful without being pretentious, full of galleries and cafes and walking trails that meandered through woods filled with wildflowers. At the bed and breakfast, I met other solo travelers, people who had decided to prioritize their own happiness and curiosity over other people's expectations of how they should spend their time and money. Margaret, a retired teacher from Minneapolis, was traveling to every lighthouse on the Great Lakes. Robert, a widower from Iowa, was learning to paint watercolor landscapes and visiting artist studios for inspiration. Catherine, a woman my age who had recently ended a 30-year marriage, was discovering who she was when she wasn't defined by someone else's needs. We had dinner together every night, sharing stories and laughter and the kind of easy companionship that comes from people who have learned to value themselves. I spent 40 years making sure everyone else was happy, Catherine said over wine and fish boils on our last evening. I'm spending the rest of my life making sure I'm happy. Do you ever feel guilty about it? I asked. Every day, she said with a laugh. But I feel guilty and happy instead of guilty and miserable, so it's an improvement. On my last morning in Door County, I walked down to the lake before dawn to watch the sunrise. The water was calm, reflecting the pink and gold sky like a mirror. The air smelled like cherry blossoms and fresh water and possibility. I thought about the woman I'd been a year earlier, trapped in an apartment that felt like a cage, waiting for phone calls that brought only demands, measuring my worth by other people's willingness to use me. That woman felt like a stranger now. She felt like someone I'd once known but had grown beyond, the way you might think fondly of a childhood friend whose company you'd outgrown. I wasn't angry at her anymore for accepting so little for so long. I understood that she had done the best she could with the tools she had at the time. But I was proud of myself for finally developing better tools, for finally learning that love without respect isn't love at all. The sun broke free of the horizon, sending streams of light across the water, and I felt something settle deep in my chest. Not happiness exactly, though I was happy. Not peace exactly, though I was at peace. Completion. The sense that I had finally become the person I was always meant to be, the person who had been waiting inside me for 73 years to be set free. I drove home to Chicago that afternoon listening to music that made me feel alive, stopping at farm stands and antique shops whenever something caught my interest, taking detours just because I could. When I walked into my small apartment that evening, it didn't feel cramped or depressing or temporary anymore. It felt like home. Not because it was luxurious or spacious or perfect, but because it was mine. Because it was a place where I was free to be myself, where nobody expected me to be smaller or quieter or more convenient than I naturally was. I unpacked my suitcase and put my new watercolor paintings on the refrigerator next to the phone numbers of my art class friends. I made myself tea in my favorite mug and sat in my recliner watching the sunset paint the Chicago sky in shades of orange and pink. My phone was silent, but I wasn't waiting for it to ring. I had plans for tomorrow: art class in the morning, lunch with Mrs. Hernandez in the afternoon, a community theater performance in the evening with Margaret from my support group. I had a life. A real life, built on genuine connections and mutual respect and the radical notion that my time and energy and money belonged to me. For the first time in decades, I went to bed that night without worrying about anyone else's problems or needs or feelings about my choices. I went to bed happy. But life has a way of offering unexpected gifts just when you've learned to stop expecting them. In August, 6 months after Sarah's letter, Anna called again. "Grandma, I have news." Good news or bad news? Good news, I think. I'm going to Northwestern in the fall, and I wanted to know if you'd like to have dinner with me sometimes. Like, regularly. Like, maybe once a week or something. My heart jumped. Northwestern was right here in Chicago. Anna would be living 20 minutes away from me. I would love that, sweetheart. But what do your parents think about it? They don't get to decide. I'm 18 now, and I can have relationships with whoever I want to have relationships with. That's true, but I don't want to cause problems for you at home. Grandma, there are already problems at home. Big problems. Mom and Dad are getting divorced. The news shouldn't have surprised me, but it did. Sarah and her husband had seemed stable, comfortable, settled in their suburban life. I'm sorry to hear that, Anna. I'm not. They've been miserable for years. They just stayed together out of habit and because they were afraid of change. Kind of like the way they expected you to stay in a relationship that made you miserable. Anna's insight continued to amaze me. How is your mom doing? She's different. She's been going to therapy, talking about family patterns and boundaries and stuff. She talks about you a lot. What does she say? That she understands now why you did what you did. That she wishes she had been braver. That she's learning how to stand up for herself the way you stood up for yourself. I felt a complicated mix of sadness and pride. Sadness that Sarah was going through the pain of a divorce, pride that she was finally learning to value herself enough to leave a relationship that wasn't serving her. Anna, can I ask you something? Do you think your mom would be interested in having lunch with me sometime? Just the two of us, no expectations, no agenda. Just to talk. I think she'd like that very much. But Grandma? Yes? Don't do it because you feel sorry for her or because you think you have to. Do it because you want to. How did you get so wise? I learned from watching you. Anna and I had dinner that week at a small Italian restaurant in Evanston, near the Northwestern campus. She looked older than 18, more mature and self-possessed than I remembered. We talked about her classes, her roommate, her plans to major in journalism. We talked about my art, my volunteer work, my trip to Door County. It was easy and natural and filled with the kind of affection that doesn't need to be earned or proven or purchased. After dinner, as we walked through campus in the soft August evening, Anna said, "Grandma, can I tell you something? Always. What you did last year, standing up to everyone the way you did, it changed my whole idea of what it means to be a woman." How so? I always thought being a good woman meant making everyone else comfortable, even if it made you miserable. I thought it meant saying yes to everything and never asking for what you needed. A lot of women think that. But watching you refuse to accept being treated badly, watching you choose yourself even when it was hard and lonely and scary, it showed me that there's another way to be. What way is that? Strong. Not mean or selfish or unkind. But strong enough to believe that you deserve respect and love and kindness, and strong enough to walk away from people who can't give you those things. We walked in comfortable silence for a while, the tree-lined streets quiet except for the distant sound of students laughing and music playing from dorm windows. "Grandma?" Anna said finally. "Yes? I'm proud to be your granddaughter." I stopped walking and turned to look at her, this beautiful young woman who had somehow grown up wise and strong and kind despite being raised in a family that struggled with all three of those qualities. "Anna, you are the best thing that came out of the worst year of my life." "What do you mean?" "I mean that if I hadn't finally stood up for myself, if I hadn't finally demanded to be treated well, I never would have discovered what it feels like to have a real relationship with you. I would have kept settling for the scraps everyone else was willing to give me, and I would have missed out on this." She hugged me then, right there on the sidewalk in front of the Northwestern Library, and I realized that this was what family was supposed to feel like. Not obligation or manipulation or transaction, but genuine affection and mutual respect and the simple joy of being in each other's company. A week later, I met Sarah for lunch at a quiet cafe in Lincoln Square. She looked different than she had the last time I'd seen her. Thinner, more tired, but also somehow more present. Like she'd been living in a fog for years and was finally seeing clearly. "Mom," she said when she saw me, and her voice was thick with emotion. "Hi, sweetheart." We ordered coffee and sandwiches and spent the first few minutes in the kind of awkward small talk that happens when people who love each other have hurt each other and aren't sure how to bridge the gap. Finally, Sarah took a deep breath and said, "Mom, I owe you an apology. A real apology, not just the letter I sent. I owe you an acknowledgement of how badly I treated you, and I owe you the truth about why." Okay. I was scared. I was scared of my brothers, scared of conflict, scared of having to choose between you and them. I was scared of admitting that we'd been wrong because that would mean we'd been hurting you for years and I couldn't handle the guilt. And now? Now I realize that the guilt was appropriate. We were hurting you. We were using you. We were treating you like you didn't matter, and you did matter. You mattered more than anyone else in our lives, and we treated you worse than we would treat strangers. I felt tears starting to form. Not tears of sadness, but tears of relief. Someone finally saw me clearly. Someone finally understood. "Sarah, why now? Why are you able to see this now when you couldn't see it before?" "Therapy," she said with a rueful laugh. "Lots and lots of therapy. My therapist kept asking me about family patterns, about how we communicated and resolved conflicts and showed love. And I kept saying we were a normal family, we were fine, we just had some issues with boundaries. But she asked me to describe my relationship with you, and when I started talking about it, when I heard myself explaining how we interacted, it sounded horrible. It sounded like emotional abuse. The word hung in the air between us. Is that what you think it was? I asked. I think it was neglect that became abuse. I think we started by taking you for granted, and then we got comfortable with treating you badly, and then we got defensive about treating you badly, and then we convinced ourselves that you were the problem for not accepting being treated badly. That's a pretty accurate assessment. Mom, I need you to know that I understand why you walked away. I understand why you had to protect yourself from us. I understand that loving us didn't mean you had to let us hurt you. Thank you for saying that. I also need you to know that I don't expect forgiveness. I don't expect trust. I don't expect you to just forget everything that happened and go back to the way things were before. What do you expect? I expect that if you're willing to try having a relationship with me again, it will have to be a completely different kind of relationship. One where I earn your trust instead of assuming I deserve it. One where I show up for you instead of just expecting you to show up for me. One where I treat you like someone I love instead of someone I own. I studied her face, looking for signs of manipulation or performance. But what I saw was exhaustion and genuine regret and something that looked like real change. Sarah, I sent you a letter last year listing specific things I needed to see from you and your brothers if we were going to continue having a relationship. Do you remember what those things were? Respect for your time and energy. Inclusion in family events without being expected to pay for or work at them. Regular contact that wasn't transactional. Acknowledgement of how we'd been treating you. And are you prepared to do those things? I'm prepared to try. I can't speak for Michael and David, but I can speak for myself. And I want to have a real relationship with you, Mom. Not because I need something from you, but because I miss you. Because I love you. Because you're my mother and I finally understand what that's supposed to mean. We talked for 2 more hours, working through years of hurt and misunderstanding and missed opportunities. It wasn't easy, and it wasn't comfortable, but it was honest in a way our relationship had never been before. When we parted ways, we didn't hug or make promises or pretend that one conversation had fixed everything. But we agreed to have lunch again the following week, and the week after that, and to see if we could build something real and sustainable and healthy. I walked home that afternoon feeling cautiously hopeful. Not because I was sure Sarah would follow through on her promises, but because I was sure I would be okay whether she did or not. The difference between desperation and hope, I was learning, is that desperation needs a specific outcome to survive, while hope can flourish regardless of what other people choose to do. Fall arrived in Chicago with its spectacular display of color, the trees along my street transforming into a canopy of golden, crimson and orange. I had been having weekly lunches with Sarah for 2 months, and slowly, carefully, we were building something that felt like a real relationship. She called me just to talk sometimes now. She invited me to her new apartment, a small place in Andersonville that she was decorating with her own taste rather than trying to impress anyone else. She asked about my art classes and my volunteer work and my friends, and she listened to my answers with genuine interest. Most importantly, she never asked me for money. Not because I wouldn't have given it to her if she'd needed it, but because she never positioned our relationship as transactional. She never made me feel like my value to her depended on what I could do for her. Anna was thriving at Northwestern, and we had dinner together every week. She brought friends sometimes, young people who treated me like an interesting person rather than someone's burden. They asked about my life, my experiences, my opinions on everything from politics to relationships to the best pizza in Chicago. Through Anna and her friends, I was remembering what it felt like to be valued for my wisdom and experience rather than pitted for my age. But I still hadn't heard from Michael or David. I wasn't waiting for them anymore, but I thought about them sometimes. I wondered if Michael was happy in his expensive condo with his wife who seemed to care more about appearances than relationships. I wondered if David had found whatever he was looking for in Portland, or if he was still running from anything that required emotional intimacy. I hoped they were happy, genuinely. But I didn't need them to be happy for me to be happy. Their choices were theirs to make, and the consequences were theirs to live with. Then, on a cold November afternoon, my phone rang. Mom? The voice was unfamiliar, shaky and small. Yes? Mom, it's Michael. I almost didn't recognize him. The confident, dismissive tone I was used to hearing was gone, replaced by something that sounded like desperation. Hello, Michael. Mom, I need to tell you something. Okay. Ashley left me. I felt a flicker of satisfaction that I wasn't proud of, followed immediately by genuine concern for my son's pain. I'm sorry to hear that. She took everything. The condo, the car, half our savings. She said I was emotionally unavailable and that she was tired of being married to someone who didn't know how to love people. The irony was so sharp it almost made me laugh. Ashley, who had coached Michael through cutting me out of their lives, had left him for the same emotional coldness he had directed at me. How are you doing? I'm not doing well, Mom. I'm not doing well at all. Are you asking for help? Yes. I'm asking for help. But not money, he said quickly. I don't need money. I need to know how to fix this. How to fix everything I've broken. The fact that he wasn't asking for money was significant. It suggested that maybe, finally, he was understanding the difference between needing something from me and needing me. Michael, are you asking for my advice, or are you asking for my forgiveness? Both, I think. But mostly I'm asking if there's any way I can be your son again. The question broke something open in my chest, something that had been closed and protected for more than a year. You never stopped being my son, I said gently. But you did stop treating me like your mother. I know, and I'm sorry. I'm sorry for all of it. For the wedding, for the money, for treating you like you didn't matter. For choosing Ashley over you every single time. Why did you do it, Michael? Help me understand. Because it was easier. Because she made me feel successful and important, and including you in our lives made me remember that I wasn't as successful as I wanted to be. Because you knew me when I was small and scared and needy, and I wanted to pretend I'd outgrown all of that. So you tried to outgrow me instead. Yes. And it was the stupidest thing I've ever done. We talked for an hour, and by the end of the conversation, I had agreed to meet him for coffee the following week. Not because I was ready to trust him again, but because I was strong enough now to listen to his apology without needing it to heal me. I had already healed myself. The coffee shop Michael chose was small and quiet, the kind of place where you could have a serious conversation without being overheard. He was waiting for me when I arrived, and he looked older than his 45 years. Thinner, grayer, worn down by the consequences of his own choices. Mom, thank you for coming. You're welcome. I've been thinking about what you said on the phone, about me stopping treating you like my mother. You were right. I stopped seeing you as a person and started seeing you as, I don't know, as an inconvenience. As someone whose feelings I didn't have to consider because you were always going to be there anyway. That's a fair assessment. I took you for granted. I took your love and your generosity and your forgiveness for granted. And when you finally stood up for yourself, I was so shocked that I got angry instead of getting introspective. What made you introspective now? Losing Ashley made me understand what it feels like to be discarded by someone you love. It made me realize that I'd been discarding you for years, just more slowly and quietly. And how did that feel? Horrible. It felt horrible, and I realized that if it felt that bad for me, it must have felt even worse for you because you'd been loving me unconditionally for my entire life, and I'd just thrown that away. I watched him struggle with the weight of his own realization, and I felt something I hadn't expected to feel. Not forgiveness exactly, but compassion. Michael, what is it you want from me? I want another chance. I want the chance to be the son you deserved all along. I want to learn how to love you the way you loved me. And what does that look like to you? I don't know. I honestly don't know because I've never done it before. But I want to figure it out. I want to call you just to ask how you're doing. I want to include you in my life because I want you there, not because I need something from you. I want to care about your happiness the way you've always cared about mine. Those are nice words, Michael. But I've heard nice words before. I know. And I know I'll have to prove it with actions. I know I'll have to earn your trust back. I know you don't owe me anything. No, I don't. But will you let me try? Will you give me the chance to show you that I can be different? I looked at this man, my firstborn, the child I'd carried and nursed and raised with so much hope and love and pride. I thought about the little boy who had blown out candles on dinosaur cakes, the teenager who had cried on my shoulder about his broken heart, the young adult who had called me from college just to hear my voice. That person was still in there somewhere, buried under years of selfishness and thoughtlessness and Ashley's influence. The question was whether he was strong enough and committed enough to do the hard work of digging that person back out. Michael, I said, I'm willing to let you try. But I need you to understand that this isn't about going back to the way things were before. This is about building something completely new. I'm not the same person I was a year ago. I won't accept being treated badly just to avoid conflict. I won't give you money just because you ask for it. I won't pretend everything's fine when it isn't. I understand. I also won't be patient with backsliding. If you start falling into old patterns, if you start treating me badly again, I won't give you third and fourth and fifth chances. I'll walk away again, and next time it will be permanent. I understand that too. And finally, this relationship has to be about more than your crisis. You can't just show up when your life falls apart and disappear when things get better. If you want to be my son, you have to want to be my son consistently, not just when you need mothering. Mom, I want to be your son all the time. I want to be the man you raised me to be instead of the man I became. It was the right thing to say, and more importantly, it sounded like he meant it. Okay, I said. Let's see what you can do. Over the next few months, slowly and carefully, Michael and I began to build a relationship that was unlike anything we'd ever had before. He called me regularly, not just when he was in crisis but when he had good news to share or when he'd had a particularly good day at work or when he'd seen something that reminded him of me. He invited me to his new apartment, a modest place in Wicker Park that was smaller than his old condo but filled with books and music and evidence of a life being lived thoughtfully rather than just expensively. He joined me for art class one Saturday morning, sitting at the easel next to mine and painting his first watercolor landscape while I worked on a portrait of Mrs. Hernandez's cat. Mom, he said while mixing colors on his palette, I didn't know you were so talented. I didn't know either until I started taking these classes. When did you start? Right after I decided to stop funding everyone else's dreams and start pursuing my own. He was quiet for a moment, processing the implication. I'm glad you pursued your own, he said finally. I'm glad you didn't let us stop you from becoming the person you were meant to be. It was such a different response than the old Michael would have given that I had to put my brush down for a moment to collect myself. The old Michael would have said something dismissive about hobbies or made a joke about me trying to be artistic at my age. This Michael was genuinely proud of me for growing and changing and refusing to let other people's limitations become my own. We were building something real. Christmas approached, and for the first time in years, I wasn't dreading the holidays. Sarah had invited me to spend Christmas Eve at her apartment, just the two of us and Anna. Michael had asked if he could join us, and Sarah had agreed. David was still in Portland, still silent, still unwilling to acknowledge that anything needed to change. But I wasn't waiting for him anymore, and I wasn't letting his absence diminish my enjoyment of the relationships I did have. On Christmas Eve morning, I wrapped gifts for Sarah and Michael and Anna, small things that reflected our new relationships rather than expensive attempts to buy their love. A set of good watercolor brushes for Michael, a beautiful journal for Anna, a cookbook of simple, healthy recipes for Sarah who was learning to take better care of herself. I also wrapped a gift for myself, something I'd never done before. A book of poetry by Mary Oliver, a woman who understood about late bloomings and unexpected transformations and the courage it takes to choose yourself. Sarah's apartment was warm and inviting, decorated simply but beautifully with white lights and poinsettias and a small tree that smelled like childhood memories. We cooked dinner together, the three of us plus Michael moving around the kitchen with the kind of easy cooperation that comes from people who actually enjoy each other's company. Anna told us about her classes and her new boyfriend and her plans to study abroad in Ireland the following year. Michael talked about his job and the novel he was thinking about writing and the therapy sessions that were helping him understand why he'd been so afraid of emotional intimacy. Sarah shared updates about her divorce proceedings and her new part-time job at a non-profit and the pottery class she'd started taking. And I told them about my volunteer work and my art and my plans to take a longer trip in the spring, maybe to New England to see the museums and galleries I'd always wanted to visit. We were four adults sharing our lives with each other, not a mother being used by her children or children being controlled by their mother. We were equals, connected by love and choice rather than obligation and guilt. After dinner, as we sat around Sarah's tree drinking wine and eating the cookies Anna had made, Michael cleared his throat. "Mom, I have something I want to say." "Okay. This is the best Christmas I've had since I was a kid. And it's not because of the food or the presents or any of that. It's because this is the first time in years that I felt like I was actually connecting with my family instead of just performing my role in it." "What's the difference?" Anna asked. "The difference is that tonight I feel like you all see me as a person rather than just a son or a brother. And I feel like I'm seeing all of you as people rather than just as family members I'm obligated to tolerate." "Is that what we were to you before?" Sarah asked. "Obligations? Sometimes. A lot of times. And I think I was just an obligation to you too. Someone you included because you had to, not because you wanted to." "You're right," Sarah said quietly. "I think we all stopped choosing each other and started just enduring each other. But tonight feels different," Michael continued. "Tonight feels like we're all here because we want to be here. Tonight feels like love instead of duty." I looked around at these three people, my children and grandchild, and realized that Michael was right. This was what family was supposed to feel like. Not perfect, not without history or complications, but built on genuine affection and mutual respect. "I have something to say too," I said. They all turned to look at me. A year and a half ago, I thought I was going to die lonely and forgotten, surrounded by people who saw me as useful rather than valuable. I thought that was just how life worked when you got old, that you had to accept whatever crumbs of affection people were willing to give you. "Mom," Sarah started to interrupt, but I held up my hand. "I'm not saying this to make you feel guilty. I'm saying this because I want you to understand how much has changed. Tonight, sitting here with all of you, I feel seen and valued and loved. Not because of what I can do for you or give you, but because of who I am." "You've always been valuable, Grandma," Anna said. "We just forgot how to show you that." "That's true. But I also forgot how to ask for it. I forgot how to believe I deserved it. This year taught me that you can't love other people well if you don't love yourself enough to insist on being treated well." "Is that why you walked away from us?" Michael asked. "I didn't walk away from you. I walked away from the way you were treating me. There's a difference." "But what if we hadn't changed? What if we'd just stayed angry and stubborn and refused to see what we were doing wrong? Then I would have been sad, but I would have been okay. Because I learned that being alone with dignity is better than being connected without respect." "You wouldn't have been alone anyway," Anna said. "You had Mrs. Hernandez and your art class friends and the people at the community center. You had people who appreciated you." "That's true. I learned that family isn't just about genetics. Family is about love and respect and showing up for each other. And by that definition, I had more family after I stopped accepting bad treatment than I'd had before. We talked until almost midnight, processing years of hurt and misunderstanding and working our way towards something that felt like forgiveness. Not the kind of forgiveness that pretends nothing happened, but the kind that acknowledges the pain while choosing to move forward anyway. When I got home that night, I poured myself a glass of wine and sat in my recliner looking out at the Chicago sky, surprisingly clear for a winter evening. The stars were visible despite the city lights, scattered across the darkness like promises of hope. I thought about the woman I'd been 2 Christmases ago, waiting by the phone for calls that didn't come, eating microwaved meals alone, measuring her worth by other people's willingness to need her. That woman felt like a character in a sad story I'd once read, someone I felt sorry for but could barely remember being. The woman I was now had friends and hobbies and plans for the future. She had relationships built on mutual respect and genuine affection. She had boundaries that protected her from exploitation and self-worth that didn't depend on other people's approval. She had a life worth living. More importantly, she had learned the difference between love and need, between being wanted and being used, between family and genetics. She had learned that sometimes the most loving thing you can do is refuse to accept being loved badly. She had learned that it's never too late to choose yourself, even when choosing yourself means disappointing people you care about. She had learned that courage isn't the absence of fear, but the decision that something else is more important than fear. Spring arrived early that year, and with it came news that surprised no one but still felt significant. David called. "Mom? It's David." "Hello, David." "Mom, I've been thinking about everything that happened. About the way we treated you. About the things you said in your letter. And you were right. About all of it. We were using you. We were treating you badly. We were taking you for granted. What made you realize that? I started dating someone here in Portland. Someone I really care about. And she asked me to tell her about my family, and when I started talking about you, she got this look on her face." "What kind of look?" "Like she was horrified. She said it sounded like we'd been emotionally abusing you for years, and that she wouldn't be able to respect me if I didn't figure out how to make it right." It was interesting that it had taken a stranger's perspective for David to see what he'd been doing to me, but I was grateful for the wake-up call regardless of where it came from. "So you're calling to make it right?" "I'm calling to ask if there's any way to make it right. I know I probably waited too long. I know you've probably moved on and don't need me in your life anymore." "David, I've never not needed you in my life. I just stopped being willing to accept being treated badly by you. I want to learn how to treat you well. I want to learn how to be your son instead of just someone who calls you when he needs something. Are you willing to do the work that requires?" "Yes. I think so. I don't really know what the work is, but I'm willing to figure it out. The work is building a relationship based on who we are now, not on who we were when you were a child. The work is learning to see me as a complete person with needs and feelings and boundaries. The work is showing up consistently, not just when it's convenient for you. I can do that. Can you? Even when it means admitting you were wrong? Even when it means changing patterns that have been comfortable for you? Even when it means caring about my feelings even when they inconvenience you? I want to try." "Then come home," I said. "Come home and let's see what we can build together." David flew to Chicago 2 weeks later, looking nervous and uncertain in a way I hadn't seen since he was a teenager. We met at the same cafe where I'd had my first real conversation with Michael, and I could see him struggling with how to begin. "Mom, I owe you an apology that's about 5 years overdue. I'm listening. I treated you like you were disposable. Like you were just there to solve problems and provide money and then disappear until the next crisis. I never thought about your feelings or your needs or what you might want from life. Why? Because it was easier to think of you as a resource than as a person. Because thinking of you as a person would have meant acknowledging how selfish I was being. And now? Now I want to know you as a person. I want to know about your art and your friends and your dreams. I want to care about your happiness the way you've always cared about mine." We talked for 3 hours that afternoon, and David stayed in Chicago for a week, giving us time to start building something real. He came to art class with me, met my friends from the community center, helped me plant tomatoes in the small garden plot I'd rented behind my building. He asked questions about my life, my interests, my experiences. He listened to my answers without trying to change the subject or redirect the conversation back to himself. On his last day in town, he said something that made me realize how much we'd both changed. "Mom, I want you to know that I'm proud of you." "For what?" "For refusing to accept being treated badly just to keep peace in the family. For choosing yourself when none of us were choosing you. For building a life that makes you happy instead of just waiting for us to include you in ours." Thank you, sweetheart. I also want you to know that I'm going to be different going forward. Not perfect, but different. I'm going to call you regularly. I'm going to visit when I can. I'm going to remember your birthday and holidays and important events. I'm going to treat you like you matter. Why? Because you do matter. Because you're my mother and you deserve to be loved well. And because the woman who raised me taught me better than I was acting. That night, after David left for the airport, I sat in my garden watching the sun set behind the Chicago skyline. The tomato plants were small and green, full of promise for the harvest to come. The air smelled like fresh earth and possibility. I thought about the journey that had brought me to this moment, the pain and isolation and desperation that had finally given me the strength to demand better for myself. I thought about all the people who had supported me along the way, Mrs. Hernandez with her soup and kindness, Carmen at the legal aid office with her validation and guidance, Maria and the other artists who had welcomed me into their community, the women in my support group who had shared their own stories of finding themselves after years of losing themselves to other people's needs. I thought about Anna, who had seen me clearly from the beginning and had never stopped believing I was worth loving well. I thought about Sarah and Michael and David, who had needed me to teach them how to love me by first learning to love myself. Most of all, I thought about the woman I had become, the woman who had been waiting inside me for 73 years to be set free. She was strong enough to stand alone and wise enough to know the difference between loneliness and solitude. She was brave enough to walk away from relationships that diminished her and patient enough to rebuild them on better foundations when the other person was willing to do the work. She was capable of love without sacrifice, generosity without exploitation, forgiveness without doormat behavior. She was finally, fully, completely herself. As the stars began to appear in the darkening sky, I raised my glass of wine in a toast to the woman I'd become and the life I'd built from the ashes of the life I'd allowed to be taken from me. Here's to late bloomings, I said out loud, feeling only slightly silly for talking to myself in my garden. Here's to second chances and third acts and the courage to choose happiness over habit. Here's to finally understanding that love isn't something you earn by making yourself small or useful or convenient. Love is something you give and receive freely, or it's not love at all. Here's to learning that the most radical thing a woman can do is believe she deserves respect, and the most powerful thing she can do is insist on receiving it. Here's to discovering that it's never too late to save your own life. I finished my wine as the city lights began to twinkle around me, each one representing someone else's story, someone else's struggles and triumphs and quiet moments of recognition. Tomorrow I would call Anna and make lunch plans. I would work on the painting I'd started of Lake Michigan at sunrise. I would meet Margaret at the community center and help serve dinner to people who needed a good meal and a friendly face. Tomorrow I would continue living the life I'd built for myself, one choice and one boundary and one small act of self-love at a time. But tonight, I would sit in my garden under the Chicago stars and feel grateful for the long, difficult journey that had brought me home to myself. Tonight, I would celebrate the woman who had finally learned that she was worth celebrating. Tonight, I would rest in the peace that comes from knowing that whatever tomorrow brought, I would face it as someone who knew her own value and refused to accept less than she deserved. Tonight, I was free. Now, more than 2 years after that first terrible text message about the wedding invitation, I can say with certainty that walking away from relationships that were hurting me was the best decision I ever made. Not because it was easy, it wasn't. Not because it didn't hurt, it did. But because it taught me that I am strong enough to survive disappointment and brave enough to demand better and wise enough to know the difference between love and settling. My relationship with my children isn't perfect now. We still have difficult conversations sometimes. We still trigger each other's old patterns occasionally. We still have to work at treating each other well instead of just assuming good intentions will be enough. But it's real in a way it never was before. It's built on mutual respect and genuine care rather than obligation and guilt. It's a relationship between adults who choose to be in each other's lives rather than family members who just endure each other. And most importantly, I know that if they started treating me badly again, I would have the strength to walk away again. That knowledge protects me from falling back into old patterns of accepting whatever crumbs of affection people are willing to give me. I learned that you can love people and still refuse to let them hurt you. I learned that family relationships require the same boundaries and respect as any other relationship. I learned that being someone's mother doesn't mean accepting whatever treatment they're willing to give you. I learned that sometimes the most loving thing you can do for everyone involved is to stop participating in dynamics that bring out the worst in all of you. Most of all, I learned that respect isn't something you earn by being useful. Respect is something you insist on by believing you deserve it. Have you ever found yourself in a situation where people who claimed to love you were treating you badly? Have you ever had to choose between staying connected to family members who hurt you and protecting your own well-being? I'd love to hear your story in the comments below. Sometimes the most healing thing we can do is share our experiences with people who understand what we've been through. If this story resonated with you, please give it a like and subscribe to this channel. Your engagement helps me continue sharing stories that might help someone else who is struggling with similar situations. Remember, it's never too late to choose yourself. It's never too late to demand better. It's never too late to build a life that reflects your worth instead of other people's willingness to see it. You deserve respect. You deserve kindness. You deserve love that doesn't come with conditions or costs or constant disappointment. And if the people in your life can't give you those things, you have the right to find people who can. Thank you for listening to my story. Thank you for seeing me and hearing me and understanding that sometimes the most courageous thing you can do is save yourself. Take care of yourself.